Yeah, but we still hear you good.
Perfect. Perfect. Oh, is there like echo going on? I just realized that I had the live stream on and then my voice was coming through, which it is on the live stream.
Yes. So you will hear an echo, right? Because there are two voice lines.
Yeah, I decided to pause it.
Don't worry about the questions coming from YouTube because we have a PIC here. She will help with the transferring the questions from YouTube to QuickCom, so you can manage everything on QuickCom and you can check the chat box to see all the questions.
Okay.
No
perfect.
matter where they are. Yes. So Manny, are you in Lisbon? Is this a business trip or you are based there?
I was in Lisbon just for the event. So no, I'm actually based in Turkey, of all places.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
But-
you are in Lisbon now or in Turkey?
in Turkey. Yeah. Yes, you couldn't bring a nice setup like this with me to Lisbon. But I'm glad to be home. It was long, but it was fun. But 2 weeks in Lisbon is a lot. So
Yes. And if we go for like vacation is totally different from a business trip.
100%. Oh yeah, very different.
Yeah, it's totally okay, Manny. We will start in 4 minutes, so I believe that is, yeah. Please take your time. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And please stay with us until the end of this workshop because, as usual, we have an NFT giveaway. By the end of the workshop, you will see our link to receive an NFT. So please stay at the end of this. And if you want to talk or to raise question, please feel free to click on the button raise hand on the browser. So I will help with the operation. Hi, Hazel. Okay, we will wait for like 3 more minutes and we will start at exactly 4 p.m. Okay. Oh, sorry. I have some technical problem with the screen sharing. Please. Oh. Is that okay now? Yes. Okay. Thank you. I pinned my screen on top, so it will be the bigger screen. Manny?
Yeah, I'm just checking on the YouTube channel. There's a small delay, but hopefully, because I think it's showing both of us as well as the screens.
Yes.
Okay. Is that what we wanted? Okay, perfect.
Okay, so let's start.
Sure.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and I welcome all of you to the workshop with Polygon. And I would like to introduce Manny from Polygon team. He will be our speaker today and also our mentor for this session. Please feel free to discuss with Manny. And I think Manny will be also in Discord server of East Vietnam event. So you can reach out him in Discord also after this workshop. Before we start, I would like to introduce a little bit about East Vietnam event because some of you may not know about our event and also Build-a-thon 2022. So as you may know, this workshop and Build-a-thon is a part of ETH Vietnam event this year. With ETH Vietnam, we aim to become the first hub for blockchain community to build and learn together. And we want to bring the global resources to Vietnam and help the Buidl community in Vietnam to grow bigger and better in the future. And so we want to connect the top devs and the top experts of the world with the very fast paced like developing environment in Vietnam. And so that's why we want to create something like unprecedented, and it's something that never happened before in Vietnam, and for builder community as well. That is the Build-a-thon 2022. It's a hackathon with the participation of 7, top tier entities in blockchain field, which is Polygon 1inch, Scroll, Buidl, Dorax, Blockboard, and Radio. And with the total reward and bounty of $50,000 and quadratic funding of up to $10,000, we believe that it would help, and it would help to find a lot of potential projects, and also, and it will be like a very motivating, add-on for, and also a very attractive gift for the Build-a-thon teams to join and to win the prize. And not only the capital funding, you will also receive the consultancy and also the very in-depth advice from our experts from all over the world. So we welcome all of the projects and all of the team, or no matter you are a builder, a dev, or a project owner, you can submit your idea and submit your project to win a prize. With Build-a-thon, we aim to find a very innovative idea for Web3 and also for blockchain. So it's not necessary to submit like a fully developed project. You can also bring your idea only. If your idea is creative and outstanding, you can still win the prize. And I want to mention a little bit and remind you about the timeline of the Build-a-thon. We are halfway to the submission deadline. We have 15 days left until the submission deadline on November 26th. And after that, in the main event of ETH Vietnam in 2 days, 25th and 26th of November, it will be the offline Build-a-thon. And so like we have 10 finalists of the Build-a-thon. They are invited to attend the offline Build-a-thon in Ho Chi Minh City. If you are, and we welcome all of the projects to join the offline Build-a-thon, because it will, it will be very it will help you can connect, and you can network with a lot of experts and also our judging panels there. So please join us in the offline event as well. And we also have a very special treat for the participants, because we have a demo pitch day on November 26th. In this demo pitch day, you will pitch your project with up to 30 VCs from all over the world and get access to up to $2 million funding. So it's a rare opportunity to get your project exposed to the community, to the experts, the potential investors. And so join us and bring your project to life. Okay, and for better communication and also latest updates about the event and the Build-a-thon and everything related to Eat Vietnam, please join our Discord. And we will have our supporters, our volunteers, and also our speakers from all the online workshops there. And they come from the sponsors, the organizers. They will be there to help you with everything you need related to the event, the Build-a-thon. So I will spare you some time to scan this code and join us. Manny, I see you scanning the code. So you haven't joined us on Discord, right?
All right, it's coming. I promise I'll be there. I will. But no, I was just taking a picture for memory. Just this is a moment. So
yeah. So we have like a channel for Polygon there. You can join the channels. Maybe the participants will have some questions, some technical questions for you and for Polygon after the workshop, especially.
I will do my best to answer most of your questions.
Yes. So I don't want everyone to wait any longer. I think we should jump into the main part of this workshop right now. As noted in the invitation and also in our other communication channels, today we will have a deep dive into Polygon ID with Manny. He is the developer relation engineer at Polygon, and I would like to welcome Manny. Manny, you can take over from here.
Nice. Thank you so much for the intro. So I'll be doing a little bit of a deep dive into Polygon ID. I apologize ahead of time. I am recovering from being a little bit sick, so you might hear me mute my mic a couple times throughout the day, so bear with me. But I just want to double check. Are we showing the full screen and whatnot, Lynn?
I can pin your screen. Yeah, all good.
Perfect.
Now. I pin your screen.
Awesome. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Polygon ID. And to start off with, just a little bit about myself. Again, I apologize, guys. I'm a developer relations engineer for Polygon, more specifically responsible for Europe. So definitely follow me on Twitter. I rant a lot about Web3. I talk a lot about just blockchain technology in general, and more specifically lately is in relation to Polygon. So if you do want to follow me, definitely scan this QR code. I'll leave it a couple seconds. But just a little bit about myself. I've been in tech for probably 14 years or so, traditionally from Web 2, and made the switch to Web 3. Worked for a couple different companies in Web 3, including Polygon. And I will say that I definitely love the different projects that are at Polygon. So definitely follow me. I will actually be releasing probably more tutorials in relation to Polygon ID, and hopefully that everybody can start building on top of it as a whole. Small note, this presentation actually is a remix. So what I mean by that is that there was an original presentation done by another one of our developer relations engineer, Steph, who's based in the US. She presented this in Bogota. And this is my own version of hers in terms of a different flavor, in terms of a mix. But a lot of the research, etc., a lot of the work also came from Steph. So if you have a chance, definitely look at that original video and definitely follow Steph on Twitter. She's an amazing resource when it comes to development as well. So let's start off. What information did I just give you about myself? I gave you 5 pieces of information about myself. I gave you my photo, what my job is, where I work, my name, my Twitter handle. I gave you pieces of information, and I chose to divulge this information essentially to you. And I want you guys to keep that. I want everybody to be able to keep that in mind as we go through this, is that I've chosen to divulge certain information to you, right? And sometimes there is certain information that we don't have the right to essentially have control of in terms of divulging it. And what we're hoping to do here is really analyze, is there a better way that we can kind of solve this idea of, hey, how do we have more control over what information we share with others, especially about ourselves and on the web? So let's come up with a scenario here, because SpongeBob is like the most amazing example. Let's say we had SpongeBob here who was driving around and he got pulled over by the police. And the police are asking you, can you please tell me your name, right? I need some sort of form of identification. Who are you? Let's start this, right? SpongeBob being, hey, well, my name is SpongeBob. It obviously says on my name tag here, that's my name. But there's this concept in Web3 that we really want to adopt, is that we don't trust that's just taking for granted what information that's given to us. We want to go the next step and actually verify it. So how do we verify that this information is true? Like that SpongeBob is telling us exactly this is his name and not making this up. Like, what is the form of verification for this? And the main form of verification nowadays is obviously sometimes coming from a government institution in terms of a driver's license, right? So here I'm like, hey, this is a trusted source. This is my name. You can see it on this license to kind of prove this is exactly my name. But if we look at it, we also gave a ton of other information that the officer didn't request. You know, where was this driver's license issued? What's my address? You know, what are my traits? You know, when's my birth date? What are my physical dimensions? What's my gender? This is information that we didn't necessarily want to divulge. The only information we actually wanted to and that we're responding to is just, what is your name? And we basically given out way more than we wanted to. So this is a big issue in terms of the current landscape of just Web2 in general, just dealing with different products. We give too much information to basically big tech, where they're just gulping up tons of information about ourselves, who we are, what our age is, et cetera, to kind of have as much information on us to be able to, ideally in terms of ads, et cetera, but we store the information, and we have a huge trust in big tech in that sense. But there is probably another way to go about this, right? And to give you an idea, there's actually 3 different types of identity offerings that exist in the market. So we just showed that, you know, big tech has a form of identity and storing your identity online. And one of the 3 ways that we'll get into this, and again, forgive me on these icons, but they're really simple in terms of communicating this. But there's CI, so centralized identity, federated identity, and SSI, which we'll get to in a second. Okay. So just to give you some context as to what's out there, you know, what's currently being used and how is it being used, right? So first off, the characteristics of a centralized identity is it's single purpose, you know, very siloed. We might have, because there's so many of these different types of sites, we have a password manager that kind of manages as many different accounts as possible. And we might have fragmented identity in the sense that, you know, if I get married, my name changes or something changes about me, I might need to actually update that in multiple sites. And this is the case where a lot of sites where a lot of people or a lot of entrepreneurs who are building up startups usually have some sort of siloed, data for their login or their login authentication system. And you can see that a lot of the information is really, really specific to that user. And that's really transferable, really. It's really siloed and it's very specific to that site. So that's like characteristics of centralized identity. Federated identity is like multi-purpose, basically. It's reusable. It's more portable, that's for sure. But in this landscape, big tech basically owns this. Now, I will say that SSO, so single sign-on, is an example of this, but it's actually not the full definition of federated identity. If you guys do want to find out more about different types of identity, check out Okta. Okta has a lot of different resources. That's okta.com. And they have, if you look up centralized identity, federated identity, they'll actually go in depth as to what the nuances and the minor differences between the definitions are. But the main characteristics of it is actually, hey, how can I port my identity to multiple environments, right? But in this case, as we'll see, federated identity for most tech is, you know, I sign in with Google, but my information is stored on Google. Doesn't necessarily translate to Facebook or back and forth. So I might have some fragmented identity there. So it then gets back to a semi-centralized identity. And then there's a third offering, okay? The third offering is actually called SSI, or self-sovereign identity. And we take it a step further by calling it decentralized self-sovereign identity, okay? This has all the characteristics of federated identity, where it's, you know, it's multi-purpose, it's portable, but we actually have more control as to what information we actually give to other people, right? We have more ownership over our data and what we actually decide to divulge to different parties. And this eliminates the idea, like if you're familiar with OAuth, that you actually have a third party that actually does the verification. This kind of eliminates this. This is for that verification process. And the way that it accomplishes is actually through zero knowledge proofs. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but these are essentially the 3 different types of identity that kind of exist in this space, right? And there's actually a book about this. So it's quite long, but if you do have time, definitely look at the book. It's called Self-Sovereign Identity, and it really talks about like the empowerment of SSI. So, and like the idea of having digitally signed credentials stored in like some sort of private wallet, and having more ownership in terms of saying, hey, I will only divulge certain information, but I actually still own all my data. It's not big tech and whatnot. It's in my hands in terms of that information. So SSI, okay? In SSI, or self-sovereign identity, there's actually this concept of the trust triangle, okay? And let's go back to the example of SpongeBob. So we have SpongeBob here. We're going to call him the holder or the owner, and we'll call the police officer the verifier. So the verifier makes requests to the holder and says, hey, I need you to tell me what your name is, right? And typically how this looks is the holder actually gets information that's from an issuer to be able to prove their information. And what that looks like is in the form of a verified credential. So the verifier trusts the issuer in terms of saying, hey, you're giving me some sort of verified credential that comes from this specific issuer. I trust that issuer. So therefore, if any information that comes back to me is true, then I'll just trust it, essentially. But we take it a step further with this trust triangle, is that there's a verified credential that the holder has, and they actually create a cryptographic proof of that information. So they're not actually divulging all the information to this verifier. They're just saying, hey, I have the proof to say who I am, right? And I realize that the name is a very simple example, but you could do it a step further and say, hey, how can you prove that you're over 18, right? Or for some sort of age verification. In this case, you could say, hey, I'm going to create a cryptographic proof. I'm like, am I over 18? Yes or no, but I don't actually divulge my age. So in that sense, the verifier knows that proof was generated and came from a trusted issuer. So that information is essentially trusted and verified. Okay. So what is the solution to this? This is actually Polygon ID. So we looked at the trust triangle. What does that look like in actual applicable examples? So, and that's where Polygon ID comes in, right? It's a scalable blockchain ID with zero knowledge based proofs for privacy. And I won't bore you with the major benefits of it, but essentially it's like, hey, it's really being able to have more control over your data. And I definitely recommend checking out polygon.technology/polygon-ID. They have more information over it, but the main concepts behind it is that it's decentralized, it's private by default, there's trust, and it's permissionless in terms of the main characteristics of it. All right. Let's use that example now again of SpongeBob. So we have here, back to SpongeBob in the sense of the verified trust the issuer. So now let's replace this with myself and what this looks like in terms of that trust triangle as an applicable example. So we would be me, the identity holder, and I realize that's a typo. So the identity holder essentially gets a request from a verifier, and the verifier in this sense is a piece of code. Says, hey, I'm going to request a proof, right? This proof, the verifier trusts an issuer. In this case, we actually have a test platform called platform-test.polygonid.com. In there, you can actually create different types of claims. So in this case, this is a KYC age credential. So this is a claim. It says, hey, I verified this information. You can store this in your Polygon ID wallet. And basically, when the verifier makes a request for that, it actually creates a cryptographic proof and verifies that in the code. So in this case, it's the same example as the trust triangle with myself in terms of a piece of code using an issuer that's actually a site that creates claims. And for me, the holder, I can actually create those claims or hold those claims to be able to prove multiple times with different verifiers, essentially. So in practice, what does this look like? Okay, so bear with me. This is not always the demo gods are not always on my side, but I'll go through what a demo looks like essentially. Okay. So, like we mentioned before, there's actually a site. We're going to be using this piece of code. So if you, don't worry, at the end of this presentation, I'll be giving you guys a QR code that you can get a sense of all the code, et cetera, and all the resources. But we'll be using this repo. And the idea behind it is in this repo, we have actually a few different contracts. Okay. There's an ERC 20 and an ERC 721 contract. Okay. So we have 20 and 21. So the token and the NFT basically. In those contracts, we'll see here. Let me just put this down. And let's click that. So in this contract, it's the same ERC20 contract, right? But we add a few different functionality from this other code called ZKP verifier, essentially. What this allows us to do is we actually have these almost like these hooks. So before the proof is submitted to actually verify that the proof is correct. And after the proof is submitted, we actually go through the process of saying, has this been minted already? And if not, we're going to mint like about 5 tokens essentially for this user. So we'll say if after the proof is confirmed, like the proof is submitted, go through and validate it. There's also an additional functionality that we are going to take advantage of, which is called set ZKP true. So if we go into this, the ZKP verifier, there is right here, set ZKP requests. What this does is essentially creates the requests in the format that we need, so the schema that we need, so that it can actually verify it on chain for the actual prompt and say, look for this specific type of data, this type of attribute, this type of data, and this type of logic as well. And you can store that onto the contract so that once the request goes through with your for Polygon ID and the proof goes through, the user can actually mint and get 5 airdrop tokens. Okay, and what does it look like to actually create a claim? So let me just bring up this site quickly. So there's a site called platform-test.polygon ID. Okay, I'll need to sign in again. Give me 1 second. Polygon ID. One more second, guys. All right, so here we're on platform-test.polygonid.com. So currently right now, well, the small caveat is that a lot of the contracts that are set up and whatnot to do the verification are on Mumbai. So they're on testnet. They haven't been fully deployed on production yet, but that's still coming. But the idea behind it is you would actually create a schema. Okay, this is a test site, so this is almost as acting like an issuer. So we do have some alpha news that we might actually be creating a site that allow developers to take advantage and create their own issuers. But in the meantime, if you're trying to debug and actually get started with this tech, you would go to this website to be able to kind of create a schema and create a claim. So the process actually looks like this. Okay. And I'll share this a little bit. So I'm going to create a schema. So let's call it ETH Vietnam schema. Okay, and I'm going to give it an attribute. In this case, we're going to call it date, and it's very important that that's case sensitive. And the data type, or actually, there's only 3 different data types that it supports right now. So Boolean, date, which is a numeric value, and number. Okay, so I'm going to use date in this case, and here is my awesome description. Okay, and I'm actually going to make the expiration mandatory, so that when somebody stores a claim in their wallet, that it actually can expire. So I'm just setting up the schema for this, what that looks like. Okay, and then we're going to actually create a claim from it. So I'm going to save and offer claim. So this is actually going to say, hey, now you can specify this particular claim. I'm going to say my date is, we're going to use like a date of birth. It's usually like 1990, January 1st or whatnot. And we'll say the expiration to like a few days from now. So we'll go generate claim. Okay. And we're essentially done. So what we're going to do here is going back to our offer claims. So ETH Vietnam, you'll see that there's a link and a schema hash. Okay. Now I won't go too deep, but I will in the hopefully in the Discord server to kind of give you guys an example of what that looks like. You'll actually need this hash and you'll need this claim link. Okay. Now I'm going to click this, which will create a QR code. And from there, I'm actually going to add it to my Polygon ID. So just briefly, what you'll need for this is the Polygon ID app, which is on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store. And I'm going to do an example of what that looks like. So bear with me. I'm just going to grab my phone here. And I'll share that with you guys in just a second so you guys can see what that looks like. All right. And my super secret password, obviously. Okay, I'm going to connect. That's what that looks like. Connect my wallet. It's going to prompt me for my password. Authenticated, and it's actually going to change the QR code in just a second here, and we're going to scan it again to actually add the claim. So see that ETH Vietnam, I accept, and I'm adding the claim. And then what that looks like in my claims, we'll see my data, and we'll see ETH Vietnam here with the information that I just added to my wallet. Now, one thing to note about specifically your wallet is that this is different from like a crypto wallet in terms of storing tokens. This wallet is specifically just to store claims on your wallet. Okay, any type of claims, not transferring any tokens, etc. This is really just for identity information that we're using. So we're going to take it a step further here. Now that we have the claim installed on our computer, installed on our app, we're actually going to go. There's a piece of code here. Let me bring it to, where are we? Here. If we go in this repo, there's also an HTML, where is it? HTML QR chain, okay? What this does is that we're actually following, just briefly, this proof request, okay? And what that looks like is that all this information, and I go line by line in this, you can check out this repo in terms of the information that you need to change. But this is a format that's needed specifically to be able to perform the request, okay, and the type of request. This request is also actually handled to submit on the set request, essentially, to be able to update it to the contract. So this we're using on the front end. I'm using here, this is the contract address of where we deployed. And I already deployed a contract prior to this. The method ID, which is actually the submit ZKP response function, just as hashed. The chain ID, the network, in this case, Polygon ID. You can give any reason. And the scope of this is where this really, this is where you probably need to pay attention the most, okay? So in the query, you can actually whitelist specific issuers. In this case, our issuer is Polygon ID. When we have star, we're going to actually allow for people to specify as many, there's like hashed IDs of specific issuers. So you can be even more specific in saying, hey, I only trust it coming from this specific issuer when it comes to claims. In this case, the requirement is the date attribute, which we defined prior. And then these operators of less than 2002 January 1st, essentially, right? So basically, somebody needs to be older or essentially less than that date to be able to actually mint out that token. And you'll notice that there's a schema here that you need to change. This is that URL that we talked about prior, which is here, the schema link, and as well as the hash, essentially, and the type of attribute that we're kind of coming in. So in this case, we would have changed this to ETH Vietnam, but in this case, we're just going to keep it the same for KYC H credential. And what that looks like here again, that would be this one. So you have the schema hash, the claim link, but if we go to this one specifically, KYC H credential, we need the schema hash and we need the schema URL that needs to go into it. Now, I will say that it can be frustrating at times trying to get this exactly done because it needs to prove that it works exactly. But the good news is, if you look at the repo, I have an entire section specifically on, where are you? Debugging errors. So if you get specific errors where it says wrong claim schema has been, I'll go through and you need to change the specific information. If you have a wrong query operator, you need to change this information and double check that. So I help you every step of the way in terms of the repo so that everybody can get a better sense of how to implement this themselves and test it. So let's go through the last process, right? So I'm running on my repo. Let's bring up here. There is basically, this is only a Vue.js app on React. And all we're doing here is we're creating a QR code that generates it. And what that looks like with that proof request, and we're changing out certain information. Okay. So date, deployed contract, etc. And what that looks like is just when we run it is this. So if I go through the process again, now let me bring up my phone quickly. All right. Let's move this one over here. So I'm going to scan this. Okay. You'll see the proof request. It says generating the proof. Okay. So it creates the cryptographic proof. From there, I'm just going to verify that code. And that's going to allow me to connect to my wallet. So in this case, I'm going to connect to specifically my MetaMask wallet. It's going to connect. Once it goes through. So it says here, I'm going to connect to this site specifically. As I connect, it's going to generate the proof and it's going to crash on me. Let's try this one more time. Generate proof. My secret's super secret password. It's going to ask me to connect. Uh-oh. Well, guys, as far as it goes, this is where the live demos work out really, really great. But basically what would happen is if you look at this, and we'll go to another account. We'll go to like account 4. You should see, let's see, account 3, I think. 1 second. What it looks like is that you actually get 5 ZKP tokens or ZK-ERC20 tokens right there. So after it actually goes through the mint process, submits it on chain, and then make sure that you're allowed to mint it, and it processes 2 transactions. So from your MetaMask wallet using Mumbai testnet, it actually goes through, mints everything, make sure that the proof goes through. And I actually prove that I met the criteria where I'm actually under a specific age in that sense. So, in retrospect, okay, basically you can use actually a few different issuers. I do recommend our newer one, platform-test.Polygon ID. But this is the older one you can actually play around with as well. And these are all the resources essentially that I talked about. So we have our GitHub tutorial, the one that's coming from the official Polygon ID. My code that you just saw just briefly. We have a front-end code sandbox. We have a Notion on how to do this as well. We have our issuers in terms of Polygon Platform UI and issuer. And we also have, if you want to find out more information, there's university.polygon.technology. And I do recommend checking out the docs, so polygon.technology/polygon-id. And I don't expect you guys to remember all the links that are here. So with that, if you did enjoy this presentation, you can scan this QR code essentially, and you should have this entire presentation with all the links as well. So I'll give it a couple of seconds here so that everybody can essentially scan this. And that is it. Again, the demo gods are not on my side today in terms of the app crashing, but in general, it should work. And you should see what that process looks like afterwards. If you guys have any questions, happy to take some questions right now as well.
Okay, thanks Manny for a very insightful session. So guys, do you have any question? Please leave it in the chat box or raise your hand. Well, from my previous experience with other workshop, people are a little bit shy at first. So we may have to wait a few minutes for them to brainstorm the question.
Well, let me also answer some questions that I typically get with Polygon ID. So people are like, what's the actual implementation of this? Like, where could we use this, right? And I think there's an interesting aspect of using Polygon ID in the real world, where we can do things like age verification or salary verification. So the idea of just being able to say, hey, how can I prove some certain information? And actually, if I can't remember, but there's a bank that actually did this a proof system. And again, zero knowledge proofs aren't new. We're creating an app essentially that makes it a lot easier to be able to do this on chain and off chain. But there's a bank that did this to be able to prove if somebody has a certain salary range without actually divulging that information. And we've seen a few different projects also built on Polygon ID where people are doing loans essentially to people. We're verifying, where it's a pilot project, but be able to say, hey, give me your age. Like, I need to verify if you're the right age and you make the right amount of money and you have a certain salary range. And that's all I need to know. I don't need to know where you're coming from, what your background is. All I need to know is that you pay your bills on time and I could supply a loan to you. And what that really helps with is also to avoid discrimination, where people are like, hey, I don't like the way that I don't like your background, et cetera, and saying, hey, I won't give you a loan in that sense. I think it's a great implementation or a use case where people are verifying things without actually divulging it, and really gives you more control in saying, hey, if I wanted to have my passport got stolen, right? Instead of getting it mailed to you directly, there could be an issuer that's claimed from a government institution to be able to say, hey, I prove you're this specific person, right? So it's a way to be able to prove, hey, you who say you are, without actually divulging that information. I think we got one question here. To prove, okay, so how do you prevent fraudulent proof? Someone using another person's identity to prove they're over a certain age or make certain amount of income. Okay, so here's an example. So you probably saw that me scanning that QR code and adding that claim to your wallet in that sense, right? So what you have to understand is that this is like a test environment. So it allows multiple people to add that claim to your wallet. Ideally, if you're developing this as an issuer, you would obviously remove that QR code. You only want to do one claim per user in that sense, right? So is there a way that somebody could steal your wallet and take your claim and be able to, prove that information? Absolutely. But that's the same problem that we have right now if we have any government institution, right? So like if you had your passport and somebody stole it and changed out your photo, they could essentially use your information. I think the interesting thing here is that it's all digital. It's all in your wallet. Ideally, we add more security measures in terms of like passwords to be able to make it a bit more secure. And that claim is just yours. So in that words, if you delete it, you could remove all that data so nobody else can use it in that sense too. So pop NFT over. What kind of...
Yes.
So the next question is, what kind of pre-setup is needed by the parties that want to verify a user using Polygon ID? So the verifier, you can actually get that all in this code here. So there's a coding with Manny repo specifically that for setting up the verification, you can do it. The example here is more on-chain, so dealing with contracts to be able to show an example of minting an NFT or minting an ERC20 token. All the code is there in terms of the setup for what you need to do. If you're asking about what makes an issuer, we have some of that code coming because right now we have a demo. You saw that platform-test. That's really like your dev environment so that you can kind of create different types of claims so that you can start playing around with this. What we're going to be releasing hopefully soon is the idea that you can become an issuer yourself. And then as a verifier, you just say, hey, I trust these specific issuers for their claims so that we know that there's a trusted relationship in that trust triangle that we talked about earlier. So in that sense, you would as a verifier, if you're saying, hey, I want to verify that somebody's a certain age, the government could be an issuer in that sense, and they say, I just trust this particular issuer in terms of the information they gave me, and they say, oh, you met the criteria, you're over the legal age, they verified it, and then from there, I'm like, okay, I let you into XYZ place or whatnot to confirm that you've met that criteria. Any other questions? Happy to answer more questions too later on, because it's a different methodology or a different thing to kind of grasp, but it's the idea that you really kind of own, at least in your phone through this app, the idea of holding claims and creating cryptographic proofs of it. But it's an interesting concept to be able to do application. Even the bank example, the government would want to have the identity information. Okay, Yeah, so there's a question of like, what's the incentives for some of these companies, right? Like, or like a private institution, like a bank, right? So most banks want that information, right? But banks also work heavily with government institutions, right? So yes, they probably want that information, but if you're the idea that we're introducing here is like, hey, the only solutions that we have are the ways that you sign up where you give all this information, and there's no other alternative as it is. Like you saw that there's centralized identity, federated identity. We're giving so much information. So right here, we're kind of giving a third option and saying, hey, if you as a user start adopting this and saying, hey, I want to do this, I want to implement this more, you're kind of changing, saying, hey, for banks, I'm like, hey, I want to use this form of verification so that, essentially I have a little bit more power of my data. What this also helps, and I'll just briefly touch on this, is if you guys are familiar with privacy laws like GDPR or like laws that are in the US and Canada, there is this idea that a lot of these companies store your data, and you can actually make, for most European citizens, you can actually make a request from Google or Amazon to delete your information. But most of the time they fail to do that and they pay a hefty fine. So it's weird that you're like, hey, I'm requesting my information be completely removed. This would be a more GDPR compliant type of solution because really they're not storing any information about you. You're just providing proof of information with their platforms. So if you were trying to build out an application that might be, a bit more sensitive in terms of the medical side of things, or a little bit more sensitive in terms of therapy or private information, right? This would be a great example to make sure that you're compliant without actually storing any of the user's data. Because just remember, you store that data, you might be liable for that data if they make the request, and the fines are quite expensive. It's like 4% of your full revenue, your worldwide revenue, or like a hefty millions and millions of dollars, or whichever one is the most expensive. So next question. Does all work based on the assumption that the service providers need to trust the ID issuer is doing a good job in verifying the user's claim? Yeah, so to some extent you have to, based on that trust triangle, like you're saying, I trust this particular issuer. So right now you saw in the example code, I said, you saw like quote star, so I trust any issuer in this sense because it's a development environment. But ideally you do like, hey, maybe I have a DAO or a community. It says I want to trust their information. Don't actually give me their wallet ID, but I trust the information that comes from this specific issuer, and saying, hey, this issuer confirms that they have the right or have the access. So you do need some sort of form of an original issuer that gives you the claim. And from that claim, from a verifier point of view, it's like you want to, ideally, from a more security point of view, you actually want to say, I trust these specific issuers, right? So what is the point we build a decentralized database for identity? Well, so there's databases that, I think this is more like complementary than like completely decentralized, right? If you think about it, right, you have all the, like, you're still going to go to you're going to your government institution that they're going to give you a specific ID, right? You're still going to register. They're going to store all your data, right? But they're a trusted institution, right? And unfortunately, for some of these government institutions, they're not the most secure, but you might find that that's the most pristine information that's about you to prove against, different requests going to different borders for that matter, right? So there needs to be a trusted source in that sense, right? What you're just adding here is saying, like, if you've ever gone to a hotel and like in another country, and they've taken your passport and they scanned it, right, just to kind of hold that information. I don't know how you guys feel about how secure that is, right? Because sometimes they don't actually destroy that information. And there's been cases where people have like raided a hotel and stole a whole bunch of passport information because they made photocopies. So this could be a way for proving somebody is coming from a trusted source, like a government institution as an issuer, to say who they say you are without actually divulging that information, right? Can you put an expiration date on certain identity types? So you can put, what you can do is you can put expirations on claims. So we saw that here in the platform. Well, let's get to it here. Where is it? I think it's here. Yes. So when you actually create a claim, you can actually, here, let's go to my schema, ETH Vietnam, right? And, offer rather. You can actually specify, and we made the requirement that you set an expiration. And I do recommend you do this because just like your passport, you actually have an expiration date. So you don't want to actually have that information persist forever in that sense, right? Okay, some other questions. Hi, Manny. Is it easy to move a dApp from EVM blockchain to Polygon? Okay. From another EVM blockchain too. So we do have bridging solutions right now for Ethereum and Polygon. I do know that I think there's some other third-party companies that offer bridging solutions to Polygon, but there is actually a native. If you want to check out, I believe the site, and this is a little bit outside the scope of this talk, but let me find it here. This is the URL. So this is called mapper.technology, mapper-polygon.technology. So what this allows you to do is that you can actually map specific like ERC20 tokens or specific types of contracts where you can actually map it from like Ethereum and transfer it over to Polygon and essentially vice versa. It'll actually create a copy of your existing contract on Polygon. So there's a few different bridging solutions for this. This is like, hey, this process actually takes a few days to do, and your code has to be public in terms of on Etherscan. So it has to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like submit the proof for your code to be able to show your code in that sense on Etherscan. So that needs to be open. But what it does, it actually does a mapping from one-to-one for Ethereum and Polygon. How do we update identity information? Say I want to store driver's license information and I want to change the dates every time I renew. I might also want to change my address. Yeah, so this is a good example. How would you do it currently with a government, right? You would probably go, most government institutions ask you to update your address, to come back to them and prove their address. Not everybody does update it, right? Because you have to physically go and show some paperwork in that sense, right? But in that sense is that if you did update information, you would probably set an expiration to that claim, and you actually ask them to create a new claim in that sense, right? So the same way that you would get, I want to update my information about my driver's license, I might go there and update the information and get a new driver's license, essentially. I love it. I love these questions, by the way.
We have other questions from Lamchick here. Can you put an expiration date on certain identity type?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we briefly talked about this. Is the idea that you can actually set a claim expiration on things.
Yeah.
So. Any other questions, guys?
Well, usually, because I joined other workshops, so I have some like commonly asked question. I think I can give you one of them.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
Other participants will have time to think about the next question. Well, I think what are the benefits by building on Polygon?
Like Polygon ID specifically, or Polygon?
Like both.
Okay. How much time do we have? Well, Polygon ID, like I think it's very early on. It's a lot of it from a development point of view. So it's for people to start getting used to the idea that self-sovereign identity exists and trying to implement it with their applications. And essentially some of the main benefits is having more control over your data and not actually divulging some of that information, right? If I can prove that I'm an employee of a company, but not actually divulge my name or et cetera, that might be a way for you to verify getting into a building or getting into somewhere else, right? And sometimes giving out your driver's license to somebody to be able to verify information, the unfortunate part is that some people take pictures of your IDs and it's not that great, and it might be insecure to be able to prove that information, and they might store that somewhere and somebody might do something malicious to you, right? So Polygon ID is compliant with W3C DIT. I can't remember. So I can try to find out what the answer to is. So I'm not quite sure, but I'll try to see if I can find out that information. It's a good question. What are the advantages of Polygon?
Yes.
So what it comes down to is that there's, I've had to explain this actually multiple times this week. This is good. if you think about it, the blockchain as a whole, right, in terms of Ethereum, which is like one of those main chains, like everybody's competing to be able to have their information stored on that blockchain, right? And as you can imagine, the gas costs go up significantly. Like even post proof of stake, right? The transactions have gotten cheaper, but they're still not cheap enough, right? And where Matic network specifically, again, what people don't realize is actually Polygon actually has a lot of different solutions, but most people just use the Matic network or Polygon mainnet for that matter. And one of the things with Polygon Matic is that it still uses Ethereum as a settlement layer. So it is a sidechain in that sense, right? Like every so often in terms of its transactions, it still stores its information on Ethereum to be able to know, hey, where were we at from a historic point of view. But the main difference between Polygon and Ethereum is the gas costs, all right? But people are like, oh, okay, the gas costs. Okay, so what, right? I mean, but that's a big thing, right? That's what we're saying is that we're making blockchain more accessible because like, if I had to give you $10 and I had to spend $50 to spend it to transfer that money to you, it's not really practical in terms of accessibility, right? And on Polygon, that might be like a couple of cents to be able to handle that transaction. It's a little bit more accessible. But I'll take it a step further. There's actually a news piece about this too, which I think is a win for blockchain in general. It's not like they use Polygon, but here's a use case. So in a region in India, there was a police department essentially that would get complaints filed to it, right? But those complaints would disappear or get erased, right? So when people would file complaints, you could tell that there was some form of corruption, right? So the police department actually decided to use blockchain technology to handle the complaints. So in this case, they used Polygon. So every time somebody actually filed a complaint, it was actually stored on the blockchain, so it was immutable. So they couldn't change it in a way to fight corruption, and everybody can see it in terms of transparent. Now imagine if that was Ethereum, right? And every complaint costs you $20 or $30. It's not really accessible in that sense, right? Right. But because it was on Polygon, we're looking at like smaller transaction costs that make it a little bit more accessible to be able to say, hey, I'm going to file a complaint. It might cost me a couple of cents, but that makes it more accessible worldwide for a lot of different people to be just coming onto blockchain technology, right? And I think that's a very important thing, right? And I realize there's other people that are other EVM chains that are trying to achieve this. I think a lot of the solutions that Polygon is not just Matic, right? It's coming up with different solutions that complement Ethereum in that sense. When you're thinking about Polygon, don't just think about the Polygon Matic chain. Think about zkAVM, which is a new network a testnet that we just created, which takes advantage of Ethereum's layer 1 security. We have Polygon Supernets and Polygon Edge. So if you're a company that is like, hey, I want to store all this information in the blockchain, but it doesn't make sense to store it on Polygon or Ethereum because the network might get congested, I can actually create my own blockchain using Polygon Supernets or Polygon Edge, right? So there's all these other solutions that what you have to understand is that Polygon is actually a blockchain scaling solutions company. There's like 7 or 8 different products. If you go on the main website, you'll see different solutions that even abstract certain functionality for blockchain. So Matic is definitely a solution that we have. We have zkAVM, we have Nightfall, we have so many different solutions, including Polygon ID, to be able to solve different problems and different use cases for blockchain technology. So when you're thinking about like why Polygon, it's like why Polygon the network or why Polygon in the company? I think we have like very, very smart people that are working behind the scenes, really smart engineers that are creating solutions that make the technology more accessible for everyone to be able to adopt the technology too.
Yes.
So.
Thank you for a very informative answer. I think I'm searching around if we receive any other question, but it seems like everyone is quite satisfied with the session now. And for the last question from Chan, if you want to like answer directly or you want to get the answer from Manny, you can leave a question in our Discord channel. So Manny will be there to answer yours.
Yeah, I'll try to see if I can find the answer for it quickly. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll ping our engineering team. as well. The team that works specifically with Polygon ID, they're very busy, as you can imagine, but also to make sure that you guys might have seen that small bug where the app crashed or whatnot, just to kind of make sure that the team is aware of that so that you guys can start working on Polygon ID as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's quite like a very good workshop, and people seems to be very engaging and they ask a lot of questions. So if you don't have any other questions, I think Manny, do you want to share something with us, or do you have any like advice for the Build-a-thon teams?
The main thing I would think about is for some of the hackathon advice is have somebody working on your presentation at the same time, so that they're able to kind of build it as you guys go. Focus on the one problem that you're trying to solve. Like you can create like, hey, I have this one problem, but I have like, I got to build a front end, a back end for this, etc. I want to add all this stuff, like, and I got to create this UI. Focus on the problem first, right? That you can show that demo, and if you can't solve it within the time of the hackathon, right? Show what that possible solution might look like from a UI perspective as well, to be able to say, hey, if you're stronger in the UI and saying, hey, I know this is possible, but it's just going to take longer than the hackathon. Show that example, because that's also usually factored in when it comes to hackathons too. It's like, hey, this is a really great idea. Maybe the implementation is not here, but they just need a little bit more time. And that's also a good way to be able to say, hey, for people to kind of be encouraged to work on the project some more. So yeah, that's the main advice. And follow me on Twitter at Coding with Manny, twitter.com/codingwithmanny. If you guys want to at me at any time or ask me any questions, happy to answer them on Twitter.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the advice. And I'm sorry, we have a very important thing left before we end the session. Please help me to send the link to the QR code to receive the NFT here. Let me send you all the participants the QR code to receive an NFT gift from the organizer. So please don't miss. It's your benefit of this session for joining this session. So you don't want to miss it. And please, anyone help me here. We already pinned the link to the on YouTube channel, so you can also get it there. And we also repost the link in Discord channel. And we have 100 slots only. Grab the chance now. You are okay.
Do you have to use the POAP app to be able to get it?
No, you just need your phone camera to scan the code.
I want to claim this too.
Yes.
I love POAPs. I have like so many POAPs.
Yes. We have an ticket in every workshop. Yes.
Nice.
So if you want to receive more POAP, you can join other workshops as well. We have only one workshop left tomorrow with Scroll. Okay.
Wait,
why?
it's saying that no more POAP for this event.
Oh, because I think 100 slots are claimed. So.
Oh, really? Wow, that was fast.
Yes, so fast.
Wow. I didn't even get. I did the talk and I didn't even get one. Wow.
I also can't believe that, because it's only like we are releasing like 2 minutes. Only 2 minutes.
Yeah, that was fast. Wow.
100 slots.
People are like with their phones like really quick. That's awesome.
I'm sorry if you are unlucky today. Please go back tomorrow at 3 p.m. We have other workshop with Scroll, and we also give away POAP NFT in that workshop. So if you miss today, you still have the chance tomorrow, and don't miss again.
Awesome.
Okay, so let me remind the Build-a-thon participants a little bit about tomorrow's session. We will have like a session with Scroll at 3 p.m. Vietnam time. So it's 3 p.m. UTC plus 7. So mark it on your calendar and get back tomorrow. We will send the Google Calendar link to your email. So please check your email regularly to receive. Yes, please get back tomorrow, Rabbit. People are super fast, especially when it comes to giveaway and drop, I think. So, okay, let me wrap up this session. I'm sorry. Thank you, Manny, for being here today and for a very insightful session with us.
My pleasure.
Yes. And so happy to have you in Ho Chi Minh City by the end of this November in this Vietnam event. If you can join, I believe you can join, right?
I will double check, but let me get back to you on that one. So yeah. But,
so yeah, I think people are waiting for you there. Like many of the participants will want to see you and ask you a lot of technical questions. So please manage to be there.
Right. I'll make sure to sync up with our team to make sure that I find out what the logistics of what's going on. But my pleasure again for doing this talk. And again, like you mentioned, if there's any questions, I'll try to jump into the Discord server to help anybody out in that sense too.
Okay, so that's all for today. All good now. Thank you, Manny, and goodbye. And goodbye, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, Manny. Thank you.
Bye.
Xe nữa. Chưa bên cái gì việc di truyền gì đó. Xét nghiệm gì? Chứ đi qua phải gặp khách bên đó đấy.